Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional legal, financial, or psychological advice. Family law, divorce proceedings, and asset division are governed by specific state statutes that vary significantly across the American South. The information presented here reflects historical trends, case studies, and sociological observations as of 2026. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with a licensed attorney or a qualified professional regarding their specific circumstances before making any life-altering decisions. The American South is often romanticized as the land of eternal tradition, where the phrase "until death do us part" is woven into the very fabric of the red clay and the pine forests. We are taught that the Bible Belt is the final stronghold of the American family, yet the data tells a story that is as shocking as it is contradictory. In states like Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Alabama, the divorce rates consistently outpace the national average, often ranking among the highest in the developed world. There is a quiet but powerful revolution happening beneath the surface of Southern hospitality. It is called the divorce now approach. While previous generations were coached to marinate in misery for the sake of the children, the church, or the neighbors, a new demographic of Southerners is opting for a decisive, rapid, and strategic exit. The era of the 30-year standoff is ending, and the era of the clean break has arrived. But why is this happening in the most socially conservative corner of the country? And why does the divorce now strategy actually lead to better long-term stability for some, while others find themselves trapped in a legal and financial quagmire? If you have ever wondered how the culture of "bless your heart" transformed into a culture of "see you in court," you are looking at the most significant social shift in the modern South. This deep dive masterclass is designed to solve a specific, high-stakes problem for the modern American audience. Whether you are navigating a complex domestic situation yourself, or you are a student of sociology trying to understand the shifting tides of American life, you need to understand the mechanics of this shift. We are going to deconstruct the divorce now approach by looking at the specific legal frameworks of Southern states, the economic pressures unique to the Sun Belt, and the psychological evolution of the Southern family. By the end of this series, you will understand the historical trends that created this paradox, the potential outcomes of a rapid exit strategy versus a prolonged separation, and the case studies that illustrate how the modern Southern divorce has become a masterpiece of strategic planning. This is not about encouraging the end of a marriage. It is about analyzing the reality of how marriages end in 2026. To understand the divorce now approach, we must first look at the Bible Belt paradox. For decades, the South has had the highest marriage rates in the country. People in the South marry younger, often before the age of 24, driven by cultural expectations, religious values, and a social structure that revolves around the family unit. However, historical trends show that marrying young is one of the primary indicators of future divorce. When you combine early marriage with the specific economic pressures of the South, such as lower median incomes compared to the Northeast, and a high reliance on single-income households in rural areas, you create a pressure cooker. The divorce now approach is a reaction to this pressure. It is the realization that waiting it out often compounds the financial and emotional damage. In our analysis, we see that individuals who choose a divorce now path often do so because they recognize that in a state with equitable distribution laws, like North Carolina or Tennessee, the longer you stay in a non-viable marriage, the more complex and expensive the eventual split becomes. Consider the case study of the suburban split in the rapidly growing metros of Atlanta or Charlotte. In these high-growth areas, property values have skyrocketed over the last 5 years. A couple that realizes their marriage is over but chooses to wait for the kids to graduate may find themselves 5 years down the line with a marital home that has doubled in value, but also with a mountain of commingled debt and complicated retirement assets. The divorce now approach treats the marriage exit like a corporate restructuring. It prioritizes the preservation of individual capital and the mitigation of future litigation costs. In the South, where the cost of living was once low but is now catching up to national averages, the timing of a divorce can be the difference between a comfortable middle-class life and a descent into poverty. We will examine how no-fault divorce laws, which were once controversial in the South, have become the primary tool for this rapid exit, allowing couples to bypass the fault requirements like adultery or abandonment that used to turn Southern courtrooms into theaters of public shaming. Furthermore, we have to address the shift in social stigma. In the traditional South, the social cost of divorce was often higher than the financial cost. Being the first person in your church or your small town to get a divorce was a mark of shame. But as the divorce now approach becomes more common, the stigma is evaporating. We see this in the rise of divorce registries and social media exit planners who specifically target Southern women, offering them a step-by-step guide to decoupling while maintaining their social standing. The divorce now mentality isn't just about the legal filing. It is about a cultural shift toward self-actualization over communal obligation. The potential outcomes of this shift are profound. On one hand, we see a generation that is less likely to endure domestic toxicity. On the other, we see a rapid dissolution of the traditional support structures that once held Southern communities together. As we peel back the layers of this approach, we will look at the step-by-step reality of how a Southern divorce actually functions in 2026. This isn't just about signing papers. It involves the strategic timing of the separation period, which varies from state to state. For example, in North Carolina, a couple must be physically separated for a full year and 1 day before they can even file for an absolute divorce. The Divorce Now proponents in these states have developed highly specific pre-separation protocols to ensure that once that clock starts ticking, their financial and custodial ducks are in a row. They are not just leaving, they are executing a planned withdrawal. We will also explore the homestead factor. In many Southern states, the laws protecting the primary residence are incredibly strong. In a Divorce Now scenario, the battle for the home is often the most contentious part of the process. We will look at how modern Southern courts are moving away from the traditional model of giving the house to the mother, and instead moving toward a sell and split model that prioritizes liquid assets over sentimental value. This shift is a key component of the Divorce Now strategy. It values mobility and fresh starts over the preservation of the family estate. In this deep dive, we are going to look at the hard data from the U.S. Census Bureau and the National Center for Health Statistics to show you exactly which Southern counties are leading the charge in this Divorce Now movement. We will analyze why the divorce corridor along I-85 and I-75 has become the epicenter of this trend. We are going to look at the impact of the gig economy and how it has given Southern spouses the financial independence to choose now over later. This part of our masterclass has set the stage. We have identified the what and the why. The Divorce Now approach is not a sign of impulsive behavior. In the modern South, it is often a calculated, data-driven decision made by individuals who have seen the wait-and-see approach fail their parents and their peers. It is a movement defined by legal precision, economic pragmatism, and a fundamental shift in what it means to live a good life in the American South. We are just getting started. In the next sections, we will break down the specific legal trapdoors you need to know about, the hidden costs of Southern litigation, and the psychological blueprint of a successful transition. This is the reality of the modern South. Unfiltered, data-rich, and deeply human. To understand the mechanical reality of the Divorce Now approach, we have to look past the emotional turmoil and dive straight into the legal engine of the American South. In 2026, the landscape of Southern family law is a patchwork of tradition and modern efficiency. If you are in a state like Florida or Georgia, the Divorce Now strategy often hinges on the concept of equitable distribution. This is where most people outside the South get confused. Equitable does not mean equal. While California or Washington might mandate a strict 50-50 split of community property, Southern states generally follow a rule where a judge decides what is fair based on a laundry list of factors. These factors include the length of the marriage, the economic circumstances of each spouse, and even the contribution of one spouse to the other's career. Imagine a scenario involving a couple in Nashville, Tennessee. Let us call them Sarah and Michael. In 2026, Nashville is a tech and entertainment powerhouse. Michael has spent the last decade building a boutique logistics firm, while Sarah stepped back from her career to manage the household and social obligations that helped Michael land his biggest contracts. When Sarah decides to employ the Divorce Now approach, she isn't just filing papers. She is initiating a high-stakes audit. Because Tennessee is an equitable distribution state, the court will look at Michael's firm not just as a business, but as a marital asset. Historical trends show that in high-growth Southern cities, the valuation of business assets in 2026 has become incredibly complex due to the integration of proprietary AI and remote work scaling. The potential outcomes for Sarah depend on her ability to prove her non-monetary contribution. If she waits 5 years, the business might scale further, but the debt used to fuel that growth might also increase, potentially diluting her share. By choosing to move now, she locks in the current valuation and prevents the commingling of future, separate property investments Michael might make. This brings us to a specific Southern hurdle that complicates the divorce now mentality: the mandatory waiting period. While some states allow for a rapid dissolution, many Southern jurisdictions maintain what are known as cooling-off periods. In Texas, for instance, there is a statutory 60-day waiting period from the date the petition is filed before a judge can grant a final decree. In Tennessee, if there are minor children involved, that waiting period extends to 90 days. For the person pushing for a divorce now, these 60 or 90 days are not a time for reflection. They are a tactical window. Case studies from 2026 show that successful litigants use this time for aggressive discovery. This is the process of legally compelling the other spouse to reveal every bank account, every cryptocurrency wallet, and every real estate deed. In the modern South, where many families have diversified their wealth into digital assets, the discovery phase is the most critical part of the deep dive. However, there is a much steeper mountain to climb in states like North Carolina and South Carolina. These states are famous, or perhaps infamous, for their mandatory one-year separation requirement. In North Carolina, you cannot even file for an absolute divorce until you have lived separate and apart for a full year and 1 day. For the person wanting a divorce now, this feels like an eternity. But here is the professional insight. The divorce now approach in North Carolina isn't about the final decree. It is about the separation agreement and property settlement. In 2026, savvy Southerners are treating these agreements as the de facto divorce. They resolve alimony, child support, and asset division through private contracts long before the court ever sees them. This allows the couple to move on with their lives financially and socially, even while the state legally considers them married for that mandatory year. We also have to analyze the extreme end of the Southern spectrum, the covenant marriage. Available in Louisiana and Arkansas, a covenant marriage is a legally distinct type of union where the couple agrees to more limited grounds for divorce. In 2026, we are seeing a fascinating trend where couples who entered into these marriages in the early 2010s are now finding the divorce now approach almost impossible to execute. To exit a covenant marriage, you often have to prove specific grounds like adultery, a felony conviction, or physical abuse, or you must endure an even longer separation period, sometimes up to 2 years. The potential outcomes for someone in a covenant marriage are vastly different from someone in a standard marriage. This is why the first step in any Southern deep dive is to verify the type of marriage license issued. Many people in 2026 don't even realize they signed a covenant until they try to leave. Then there is the issue of fault. While every Southern state now offers a no-fault option, usually cited as irreconcilable differences, the South has a long memory. In states like Mississippi, you can still file on fault-based grounds. Why would anyone do this in 2026? Because fault can sometimes influence the equitable distribution or the awarding of alimony. If one spouse can prove the other was wasteful with marital funds, perhaps through a gambling addiction or spending on an extramarital affair, the court may award the innocent spouse a larger share of the remaining assets to compensate. The divorce now approach in a fault-based state is often a race to the courthouse. The first person to file and establish the narrative of the breakup often gains a psychological, and sometimes a procedural advantage in the early stages of litigation. Step by step, the divorce now approach follows a very specific 2026 blueprint. Step 1 is the digital lockdown. In an era of shared cloud accounts, synced calendars, and family-linked location tracking, the very first thing a strategic spouse does is secure their digital perimeter. We have seen case studies where location data from a smart vehicle was used to prove a spouse was not where they claimed to be during a separation period, which in some states can reset the clock on that mandatory year of living apart. Step 2 is the asset inventory. In the South, this often involves tracking down land deeds that may have been in the family for generations, but were never properly titled in both names. Step 3 is the jurisdictional check. In the American South, even the county you file in can change the tone of your case. A rural county with a traditionalist judge might view the divorce now approach with more skepticism than a judge in a progressive metro area like Austin or Charlotte. The cost of this litigation in the South is another factor that is often underestimated. Because many Southern states rely heavily on expert witnesses, forensic accountants to value family farms, or child custody evaluators to navigate the deep-seated cultural expectations of parenting, the price tag can escalate into the tens of thousands of dollars within the first few months. The divorce now strategy is often an attempt to head off these costs by forcing a settlement before the litigation machine truly starts to grind. Historical trends indicate that the longer a Southern divorce remains in the contested phase, the more likely the marital estate is to be depleted by professional fees. As we move forward, we have to look at how the South's unique view on gender roles and the family unit is clashing with the 2026 economy. We are seeing a rise in what sociologists call the gray divorce, couples over the age of 50 who are opting for the divorce now approach after 30 years of marriage. These cases are particularly complex in the South because of the reliance on traditional pension plans and Social Security benefits that were structured around a different era of the American family. But what happens when the legal system is used as a weapon? What happens when one spouse uses the divorce now approach not to find freedom, but to financially bankrupt the other before they even have a chance to respond? And more importantly, how are Southern judges in 2026 reacting to the use of AI-generated evidence and deepfake allegations in the courtroom? The technology is changing faster than the statutes, and the results are unpredictable. In the next part, we are going to dive into the dark side of the divorce now approach, the tactics of scorched earth litigation, and the secret ways that assets are hidden in the modern South. We will look at how the 2026 housing market has created a brand new phenomenon known as the nesting divorce, and why it is failing spectacularly in the suburbs of Atlanta. You won't want to miss the breakdown of the silver bullet strategy that is currently turning the Southern legal world upside down. The silver bullet strategy is a term that has whispered through the halls of Southern courthouses for decades, but in 2026, it has taken on a high-tech, high-stakes evolution. Historically, this referred to a tactical move where one spouse makes a devastating, often unverified allegation of misconduct to gain an immediate advantage. In the modern South, where traditional values regarding family safety and reputation still carry immense weight, the silver bullet is used to trigger an ex parte order. This is a legal maneuver where a judge makes a ruling based on only one side of the story, often resulting in one spouse being physically removed from the marital home and stripped of temporary custody within hours. For the spouse employing the divorce now approach, the silver bullet is intended to shatter the status quo and force the other party into a position of total desperation. The potential outcomes are stark. If the allegations hold up, the filing spouse gains nearly total leverage. If they are proven false, the legal backlash can be career-ending and financially ruinous. Imagine a scenario in a high-end suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. Let us look at the case of Robert, a senior executive in the renewable energy sector, and his wife Elena. In early 2026, as their marriage reached a breaking point, Elena utilized a silver bullet strategy by filing for an emergency protective order, alleging that Robert's recent behavior posed an immediate threat to the household. Because Southern judges are historically inclined to err on the side of caution when it comes to domestic safety, Robert was served at his office and barred from entering his neighborhood. In an instant, his access to his children, his personal documents, and his primary residence was severed. This is the divorce now approach at its most aggressive. It is designed to create an immediate crisis that can only be resolved through a lopsided settlement. Case studies from 2026 show that a spouse who is locked out of their home is 70% more likely to sign a disadvantageous separation agreement within the first 30 days just to regain access to their life. But while the silver bullet is about immediate shock, the nesting divorce phenomenon in the suburbs of Atlanta is a story of slow-motion collapse. In 2026, the housing market in the Sunbelt has reached a point where neither spouse can afford to buy the other out, nor can they afford two separate homes of comparable quality. This has led many to try nesting. In this arrangement, the children stay in the family home in Buckhead or Alpharetta, while the parents rotate in and out, living in a separate, smaller apartment during their off weeks. On paper, this looks like a compassionate, child-centered way to manage a divorce. In practice, it is failing spectacularly. Historical trends in 2026 indicate that nesting creates a psychological and financial pressure cooker. Imagine David and Jennifer, who attempted nesting to save their children the trauma of a move. They soon found that the cost of maintaining 3 residences, the main house and 2 individual studios, was consuming 60% of their combined pre-tax income. Beyond the math, the lack of a clean break meant that every unwashed dish or misplaced mail item in the main house became a catalyst for fresh litigation. In the American South, where the home is the ultimate symbol of status and stability, nesting often prevents the emotional decoupling necessary for a successful transition. We are seeing that for those who want a divorce now, the attempt to keep the house through nesting actually prolongs the legal conflict by 3 to 5 years, as the lack of physical distance prevents the parties from reaching a final property settlement. This leads us into the shadows of asset hiding, which has become a digital arms race in 2026. The South has a unique economic landscape, often blending old money land holdings with new money digital ventures. When a spouse decides to move now, they often start by camouflaging their net worth. Case studies from states like Alabama and Mississippi reveal a surge in what forensic accountants call shell farming. This is where a spouse moves marital funds into an LLC that supposedly owns agricultural land or equipment, but the business is actually a dormant entity designed to sit on cash until after the divorce is finalized. Consider the technicality of the digital scavenger hunt. In 2026, a significant portion of Southern wealth is tied up in non-traditional assets. We are not just talking about Bitcoin anymore. We are seeing marital assets hidden in fractionalized real estate tokens, private equity stakes in boutique AI firms, and even high-value digital collectibles. A spouse might spend $50,000 of marital funds on a digital asset, claiming it as a hobby, while knowing full well that its value is poised to skyrocket once the final decree is signed. Step by step, the Divorce Now approach requires a forensic audit that goes far beyond bank statements. It involves analyzing metadata from shared family computers, tracking geolocation pings from smart devices to find undisclosed storage units, and monitoring the blockchain for sudden outflows of capital disguised as business expenses. There are also the financial trapdoors hidden in the 2026 alimony laws. Several Southern states have recently overhauled their statutes to move away from permanent alimony, favoring instead a rehabilitative model. This means that if a spouse has been out of the workforce for 20 years, the court may only award support for a period of 3 to 5 years, with the explicit expectation that they will become self-sufficient. For the high earner, the Divorce Now approach is a race to file before any potential legislative shifts that might favor the dependent spouse. For the dependent spouse, the Divorce Now approach is about securing a lump sum settlement before the high earner can execute a strategic career pivot or an early retirement that would diminish their support obligation. We also have to discuss the emergence of the private investigator in the age of the algorithmic footprint. In states like South Carolina, where fault-based divorce still carries significant weight for alimony and property division, the role of the investigator has shifted. They are no longer just sitting in cars with long-lens cameras. In 2026, they are digital investigators. They use AI to scrape social media for deleted posts, analyze background reflections in photos to prove a spouse was at a certain location with a certain person, and even use drone surveillance to monitor rural properties. If you think your privacy settings are enough to protect you in a Southern divorce, the data suggests otherwise. The Divorce Now strategy often starts with a massive data dump from a private investigator that makes the prospect of a public trial so humiliating that the other side settles immediately. The American South is currently a laboratory for how 18th century land laws and 19th century social codes collide with 21st century technology. The result is a legal environment that is both incredibly predictable and wildly volatile. The potential outcomes for those who navigate it correctly are a preserved legacy and a fresh start. For those who fall into the trapdoors of nesting or the silver bullet, the results are often a decade of litigation and a total loss of marital wealth. As we look toward the next phase of this masterclass, we have to ask, what happens when the fight moves from the courtroom to the newsfeed? The South is a region built on reputation, and in 2026, the social media war is where the real damage is done. We are going to analyze the rise of the divorce influencer, the tactical use of community shame, and the secret way that Southern families are using non-disparagement clauses to silence their ex-spouses forever. But there is an even deeper secret that most lawyers won't tell you. A hidden legal statute that can nullify an entire separation agreement if one specific word is missing. In the next part, we will reveal the one thing that can turn a Divorce Now victory into a lifetime of legal regret. You need to see how the 2026 social media war is being fought in the small towns of Texas and Tennessee before you take your next step. The social media war of 2026 is not merely a byproduct of a messy breakup. It is a calculated theater of operations in the Divorce Now strategy. In the American South, where reputation serves as a form of social currency, the battle for the narrative often precedes the battle for the assets. In small towns across Texas and Tennessee, your standing in the community, the church, and the local business chamber can be dismantled in a single weekend through a series of weaponized posts. This is the era of the shadow narrative, where one spouse uses the algorithmic reach of modern platforms to frame the dissolution of the marriage before the other party has even retained counsel. We are seeing a surge in case studies where the Divorce Now approach begins with a digital scorched earth campaign, designed to isolate the target spouse from their support network. Imagine the case of Tyler and Savannah in a thriving suburb outside of Austin, Texas. Tyler is a well-respected developer, and Savannah is a prominent figure in the local nonprofit scene. In 2026, when Savannah decides to execute a divorce now strategy, she does not start by serving papers. Instead, she begins a 48-hour digital rollout. On Friday, she posts a cryptic message about strength and resilience. On Saturday, she shares a photo of a packed suitcase with the caption about choosing peace over toxicity. By Sunday evening, the community has already filled in the blanks with their own assumptions. By the time Tyler is served on Monday morning, his reputation is already under siege. This is the 2026 social media war at its most efficient. It creates a psychological environment where the target spouse feels so much social pressure that they are willing to agree to almost any settlement just to make the public scrutiny stop. Step by step, the 2026 social media audit has become a mandatory part of Southern divorce litigation. Step 1 is the metadata scrub. Savvy litigants are using AI-driven tools to scan their entire digital history for any photo or post that could be misconstrued in a fault-based jurisdiction like South Carolina or Mississippi. Step 2 is the third-party monitoring. Lawyers are now advising clients to have a trusted friend monitor the other spouse's followers and likes. In the South, a sudden increase in interaction between a spouse and a specific individual is often cited as circumstantial evidence of an inappropriate relationship. Step 3 is the platform-specific strategy. LinkedIn is being used to highlight a spouse's professional successes to argue for higher alimony, while Instagram is used to showcase an extravagant lifestyle that contradicts claims of financial hardship. This brings us to the rise of the divorce influencer. In 2026, we are seeing a trend where Southern individuals are live streaming their divorce process as a way to monetize their trauma and secure their financial future. These influencers use the Divorce Now approach as content, providing their followers with a play-by-play of their legal meetings and mediation sessions. This creates a massive problem for the legal system. Southern judges who value the privacy and sanctity of the family court are increasingly issuing social media injunctions that prohibit either party from posting anything related to the divorce. If you violate this injunction in 2026, the potential outcomes include being held in contempt of court or even losing primary custody of your children. The social media war has forced a change in Southern legal ethics, where attorneys must now act as both legal advisors and digital reputation managers. But there is a hidden legal trap that is far more dangerous than a bad Facebook post. It is a single concept that can turn a Divorce Now victory into a lifetime of legal regret: the non-modifiable clause. In the rush to secure a quick exit, many people in states like Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina are signing separation agreements that contain this specific term regarding alimony. Historically, alimony was always subject to change if the circumstances of either party shifted, such as a job loss, a medical emergency, or the other spouse entering a cohabitation arrangement. However, in 2026, the push for finality has led to a surge in non-modifiable alimony. If you sign an agreement in Georgia that states your alimony is non-modifiable, you have effectively waived your right to ever ask a judge to lower that payment. Imagine a scenario where a high-earning husband in Birmingham, Alabama, agrees to pay $5,000 a month in alimony for 10 years just to get the divorce finished quickly. 2 years later, the 2026 economic shift causes his industry to collapse, and his income drops by 70%. In a standard agreement, he could petition the court for a reduction, but because he signed a non-modifiable clause in his haste to move now, the court is legally barred from helping him. He is contractually obligated to pay money he no longer has, leading to potential asset seizure and even jail time for non-payment. This is the one word that Southern lawyers often use as a trap for an overeager spouse who is too focused on the exit and not focused enough on the long-term math. The potential outcomes of missing this detail are catastrophic. We have seen case studies in 2026 where individuals have had to liquidate their entire retirement accounts or sell family land that had been in their name for generations just to satisfy a non-modifiable alimony obligation. In the South, where land is more than just property, it is a legacy. This is the ultimate failure of a divorce strategy. The Divorce Now approach requires you to balance the need for speed with the absolute necessity of future-proofing your agreement. You must ask your counsel, is this agreement modifiable upon a material change in circumstances? If the answer is no, you are not just getting a divorce, you are signing a financial death warrant. Furthermore, we must analyze the 2026 update to the live-in lover statutes across the South. Many people believe that if their ex-spouse moves in with a new partner, the alimony automatically stops. In the modern South, this is a dangerous misconception. Most states require you to prove that the new couple is in a relationship that is functionally equivalent to a marriage, which often requires expensive private investigation and a high burden of proof. If your agreement doesn't specifically define what constitutes cohabitation, you might find yourself subsidizing your ex-spouse's new life for years. The divorce now approach often skips these granular definitions in favor of broad language, and that is where the lifetime of regret begins. As we look at the shifting landscape of 2026, it is clear that the American South is no longer just a place of traditional values. It is a high-stakes arena where digital reputation and precise legal language determine who survives the split. The social media war is the smoke, but the non-modifiable clause is the fire. You have to be able to navigate both to come out on top. But even if you master the social media narrative and secure the right legal terms, there is one factor that can still bring the entire process to a grinding halt: the children. In the next part, we are going to look at the terrifying rise of parental alienation 2.0. We will explore how AI is being used to create fake evidence in custody battles, why Southern courts are shifting toward a 50-50 default that is destroying the traditional family dynamic, and the secret way that your own smart home devices are being used to testify against you in custody hearings. The fight for the kids in 2026 has gone high-tech, and the rules of engagement have changed forever. The smart home is no longer just a suite of conveniences. In 2026, it is the most reliable witness in a Southern courtroom. For those executing a divorce now approach, the first realization is often that their own walls have been keeping a ledger. We are seeing a massive shift in how metadata from Internet of Things devices is being used to settle custody disputes. Imagine the case of Christopher and Kimberly in Savannah, Georgia. Christopher, a logistics manager, claimed he was providing a stable, structured environment for their 2 children during his temporary custody weekends. However, Kimberly's legal team subpoenaed the logs from their smart thermostat and their smart refrigerator. The data showed that during Christopher's weekends, the house temperature was consistently set to 85 degrees while he was away for 12 hours at a time, and the smart fridge logs indicated that no fresh groceries had been accessed for 48 hours. In the heat of a Georgia summer, this digital evidence was used to argue that Christopher was neglecting the children's basic comfort and nutritional needs. This is the reality of the 2026 custody battle. Every interaction is logged. We are seeing case studies where voice-activated assistants like Alexa or Google Home are being used to provide ambient recordings of domestic disputes. While some Southern states adhere to strict 2-party consent laws for intentional recordings, the legal gray area surrounding accidental triggers of smart speakers is currently a primary theater of litigation. If a smart speaker is triggered by a keyword during a heated argument, that recording may be admissible if a judge deems there was no reasonable expectation of privacy in a shared marital home. Step by step, the Divorce Now strategist must conduct a digital sweep. This involves more than just changing passwords. It requires a factory reset of every shared device, from the smart doorbell that tracks when you come and go, to the smart nursery camera that might be accessible by the other parent's hidden secondary account. Beyond the hardware, we have entered the era of parental alienation 2.0. Historically, alienation was about one parent bad-mouthing the other to the children. In 2026, it has become digital gatekeeping. We are analyzing historical trends where one parent uses parental control software to effectively ghost the other parent. Imagine a scenario where a mother in Birmingham, Alabama, installs a monitoring app on her son's smartphone. She uses the app to block all incoming FaceTime calls from the father during his off weeks, claiming the child is simply too busy with homework or sports. She then uses the app's location data to show the court that the father was at a local bar during his scheduled phone time, creating a narrative of an absent, disinterested parent. This digital manipulation is incredibly difficult to prove without a forensic digital audit, which can cost upwards of $10,000 in 2026. However, the most significant structural change in the American South is the legislative shift toward the 50-50 default. For decades, states like Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee operated under the tender years doctrine or a strong preference for a primary residential parent, which usually favored the mother. But as of 2026, the potential outcomes have shifted toward a presumption of equal parenting time. In Florida, recent statutes have made it so that unless there is clear and convincing evidence of harm, the court must start with the assumption that a 50-50 split is in the best interest of the child. This has fundamentally changed the Divorce Now strategy. High earners who were historically terrified of losing their children and being saddled with massive child support payments are now moving toward divorce more quickly because they know their rights to equal time are protected by law. When parenting time is split exactly 50-50, the child support math in many southern states changes dramatically. If both parents have similar incomes and equal time, the support obligation can drop to zero. This has led to a phenomenon where the fight for the kids is sometimes a thinly veiled fight for the paycheck. We are seeing case studies in Nashville where parents are fighting over a single Tuesday night of custody not because they want the extra time, but because that one night moves them from 45% to 50%, triggering a massive reduction in their monthly support obligation. It is a cold, calculated evolution of the Southern family dynamic. This environment has given rise to the weaponization of AI-generated evidence. In 2026, we are seeing the first major wave of deepfake allegations in Southern family courts. Imagine a father in Jackson, Mississippi, who presents an audio recording of the mother saying she plans to move the children to another state without his permission. The mother claims the recording is a deepfake, created using an AI voice cloning tool that only needs 30 seconds of her actual voice to produce a perfect replica. The court is then forced to pause proceedings for months to hire a forensic expert to verify the authenticity of the file. This is the ultimate stalling tactic for someone trying to disrupt a divorce now approach. The potential outcomes of these tech-driven battles are unpredictable, as many Southern judges are still catching up to the capabilities of modern AI. Step by step, how do you protect yourself in this high-tech arena? First, you must move all communication with your spouse to a court-approved parenting app like Talking Parents or Our Family Wizard. These apps create an unalterable record of every message and every calendar change. In 2026, Southern judges are increasingly refusing to look at text messages or emails at all, viewing them as too easy to manipulate or take out of context. Second, you must be aware of the social media for kids angle. We are seeing parents in 2026 using their children's own social media posts against the other parent. A photo of a child at a late-night concert posted to their Instagram story can be used as evidence that the other parent is failing to provide a proper sleep schedule and structure. In the American South, where the role of the guardian ad litem, a court-appointed representative for the child, is still very prominent, the evaluation process has also gone digital. These representatives are now looking at the digital footprints of the parents to determine their fitness. They aren't just visiting the home to see if the grass is cut. They are looking at your LinkedIn to see if your work schedule is compatible with a 50-50 split. They are looking at your Venmo history to see if your spending habits suggest an unstable lifestyle. The Divorce Now approach in 2026 requires you to live your life as if a judge is watching your every screen. But there is a darker side to this digital transparency. We are seeing the rise of what is known as the surveillance industrial complex in Southern divorce. This is where private investigators use satellite data and AI-driven license plate readers to track a spouse's movements across state lines. In the South, where people often live in one state and work in another, this data is being used to argue for jurisdictional shifts that can completely change the outcome of a custody or support ruling. As we move into the next part of this masterclass, we have to look at the one thing that still moves faster than a digital signal: money. In the South, the family business is the crown jewel, and the 2026 economy has created a brand new set of rules for how these businesses are valued during a split. We are going to dive into the double-dipping trap that is bankrupting business owners in North Carolina, and the secret way that Southern entrepreneurs are using offshore trusts to protect their legacies. But before we get to the money, there is a psychological threshold you have to cross. There is a specific legal document, often overlooked, that can prevent your ex-spouse from ever speaking your name in public again. In the next part, we will analyze the rise of the ironclad non-disparagement agreement and why it is the most powerful tool in the 2026 Southern Divorce Kit. You need to see how the battle for silence is being fought in the boardrooms of Atlanta before you sign a single paper. The ironclad non-disparagement agreement is the invisible barrier that separates a standard Southern split from an elite-tier strategic exit. In the hyper-connected social landscape of 2026, where a single viral post can destroy a family legacy or a corporate valuation overnight, silence is not just golden. It is a contractual requirement. In cities like Atlanta, Nashville, and Charlotte, we are seeing the rise of the silent boardroom divorce. This is where the Divorce Now approach moves entirely into private arbitration, away from the public eye of the Fulton County or Mecklenburg County courts, specifically to secure a level of confidentiality that a standard judge cannot provide. The non-disparagement clause in these agreements is no longer a polite suggestion to be nice on social media. It is a high-stakes financial instrument. Imagine a case study involving Marcus, a high-level executive at a major logistics firm in Atlanta, and his wife Isabella, a prominent figure in the city's philanthropic circles. In 2026, their marriage reached a point of no return. For Marcus, the divorce now approach was a necessity to protect an upcoming initial public offering for a tech spin-off he was leading. A public, messy litigation would have signaled instability to investors. The centerpiece of their settlement was a non-disparagement agreement that included liquidated damages. This meant that if Isabella or Marcus made any public statement, social media post, or even a comment to a mutual acquaintance that could be construed as disparaging, they would be liable for a preset financial penalty, often ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 per occurrence. The potential outcomes of such an agreement are profound. It effectively creates a social media death sentence. In the South, where the phrase "bless your heart" is often used as a veiled insult, these agreements are being drafted with extreme linguistic precision to cover even the most subtle forms of shade. In 2026, Southern attorneys are using AI-driven sentiment analysis tools to review drafted agreements, ensuring that even coded language commonly used in Southern social circles is captured under the definition of disparagement. This is the battle for silence. It is about controlling the narrative so tightly that the community is forced to move on because there is simply no information to consume. But while the battle for silence manages the social fallout, the battle for the business manages the survival of the estate. In the American South, the family business is often the crown jewel of the marital assets, and in 2026, the valuation of these businesses has become a legal minefield. We have to look at the historical trends of how Southern courts handle enterprise goodwill versus personal goodwill. If Marcus's logistics firm is successful because of his personal relationships and his specific reputation in Atlanta, that is personal goodwill. In many Southern jurisdictions, personal goodwill is not considered a marital asset to be split. However, if the business has value independent of Marcus, such as proprietary software contracts and a brand that is enterprise goodwill, and it is on the table. This leads us directly into the double-dipping trap, a phenomenon that is currently causing chaos in North Carolina and Virginia. Imagine if you are a business owner, and the court values your company at $5 million. That $5 million valuation is based on the profit the company generates. The court then awards your spouse half of that value, $2.5 million, as part of the property division. However, the court then looks at that same profit to determine your ability to pay alimony. This is double dipping, using the same stream of income to both value the asset and calculate support. In 2026, case studies show that Southern business owners who do not have a specialized forensic accountant on their team are being hit with settlements that effectively double count their wealth, leading to a situation where they are forced to sell the very business that was supposed to provide their future income. Step by step, the divorce now approach for a Southern entrepreneur in 2026 requires a defensive valuation strategy. Step 1 is the segregation of assets. You must prove which parts of the business were founded before the marriage or through non-marital inheritance. Step 2 is the normalization of earnings. This involves stripping away one-time expenses or personal perks that the business paid for to find the true economic reality of the company. Step 3 is the market-based assessment. In the 2026 economy, traditional valuation multiples have been disrupted by AI and remote scaling. A business that was worth 5 times earnings in 2022 might only be worth 3 times earnings in 2026 if its core service is being automated. The strategic spouse uses this data to argue for a lower valuation now, before the full impact of the economic shift is reflected in the books. Then there is the nuclear option of Southern asset protection, the Domestic Asset Protection Trust, or DAPT. While many think of offshore accounts in the Caribbean, states like Tennessee have become domestic tax havens. In 2026, we are seeing a trend where individuals are using the Tennessee Investment Services Trust to shield assets from future creditors, including a potential ex-spouse. If a business owner in Tennessee places their shares into such a trust and survives the statutory look-back period, which can be as short as 2 years, those assets may be shielded from the equitable distribution process. However, the potential outcomes of using a DAPT are highly dependent on timing. If the trust is funded while the marriage is already failing, a judge may view it as a fraudulent transfer intended to deprive the spouse of their marital share. The complexity increases when we consider the 2026 housing market in the Sun Belt. In suburbs from Plano, Texas to Raleigh, North Carolina, the marital home is often the largest single source of equity. The divorce now approach often forces a decision: sell the home and split the proceeds, or allow one spouse to buy the other out. With interest rates in 2026 remaining volatile, the cost of refinancing a mortgage to remove a spouse's name has become a deal-breaker for many. We are seeing case studies where couples are forced into co-ownership agreements long after the divorce is finalized, simply because neither can afford to hold the property alone. This creates a lingering connection that the divorce now philosophy was designed to eliminate. As we analyze these financial mechanics, it becomes clear that the South is moving toward a more cold-blooded, transactional view of marriage. The romanticized notions of the past are being replaced by spreadsheets and forensic audits. The divorce now approach is the tool of choice for those who realize that in the 2026 economy, the only thing more expensive than a divorce is a long, drawn-out divorce. You have to be willing to play the game at a high level, using NDAs to protect your name and sophisticated trust structures to protect your future. But what happens when the financial war turns into a psychological one? What happens when the legal system is used not to find a fair split, but to break the other person's spirit? We have discussed the silver bullet and the social media war, but there is a deeper, more insidious tactic being used in the South today. It involves the use of religious arbitration and the pressure of the community to force a specific outcome. In the next part, we are going to explore the intersection of Southern faith and family law. We will look at how ecclesiastical courts are influencing secular settlements, the rise of the divorce coach as a legal strategist, and the secret reason why your choice of a mediator in 2026 could be the most important decision of your life. You need to see how the spirit of the law and the letter of the law are clashing in the rural counties of Alabama before you take your case to a judge. In the rural counties of Alabama, the courthouse square is often flanked by the two most powerful institutions in the community, the Hall of Justice and the Sanctuary. In 2026, the divorce now approach has forced these two worlds into a direct and often messy collision. While state law provides the mechanical framework for asset division and custody, the social and spiritual framework of the American South still operates on a parallel track. This is where we see the rise of ecclesiastical arbitration, a shadow legal system that is influencing secular outcomes more than ever before. We are observing historical trends where religious denominations are formalizing their own internal courts to handle domestic disputes among their members. These are not just casual meetings with a pastor. They are structured proceedings where biblical stewardship is used to argue for financial settlements that often look very different from the equitable distribution models found in Alabama's civil statutes. Imagine a case study involving Caleb and Mary Kate, a couple in a tightly knit community in Lee County, Alabama. They spent 15 years building a successful commercial poultry operation. When the marriage began to fail in early 2026, Mary Kate wanted to pursue a divorce now strategy to secure her share of the business and relocate to a larger metro area for a fresh start. However, their church's leadership intervened, citing a covenant agreement they had signed years earlier. This agreement mandated that any dispute, including marital dissolution, must first go through a board of elders before reaching a secular judge. In this ecclesiastical setting, the pressure on Mary Kate to accept a smaller portion of the business, viewed through the lens of preserving the family legacy for future generations, was immense. This created a legal paradox. While the state of Alabama might have awarded her 50% of the business's value, the social and religious pressure to abide by the elders' decree threatened her standing in the only community she had ever known. This intersection of faith and law is where the role of the modern mediator becomes critical. In 2026, the best Southern mediators are not just legal experts, they are cultural translators. They understand that a divorce now approach in a rural Southern county requires a delicate balance between the letter of the law and the spirit of the community. We are seeing case studies where mediators in 2026 are using the 50-50 custody default as a starting point, but then layering on religious and social considerations, such as keeping children in specific church-run schools or maintaining traditional holiday rotations, to secure a settlement that a judge will actually approve. In these rural areas, a judge who sees a settlement that disregards the community's social fabric may be more inclined to scrutinize the agreement, potentially slowing down the divorce now process and leading to months of unwanted litigation. Step by step, the mediation process in 2026 has evolved into a high-stakes negotiation of values. Step 1 is the identification of non-negotiable community ties. A mediator will often ask each party to list the social and religious obligations they intend to maintain post-divorce. Step 2 is the alignment of these ties with the 2026 legal reality. If one parent wants to move the children to a secular school, but the other insists on a parochial education, The mediator must find a financial compromise that accounts for tuition costs without violating the state's child support guidelines. Step 3 is the finalization of the consent order. In the South, this document is often written with a degree of specificity that would surprise someone from the West Coast. It doesn't just cover when the parent picks up the child. It covers what is expected of the parent during that time in terms of social conduct, often reflecting the traditional values of the region. But even with a skilled mediator, the rural-urban divide in 2026 is stark. While a judge in a booming city like Birmingham or Mobile might prioritize economic efficiency and the rapid dissolution of a non-viable marriage, a judge in a smaller, more traditional county might still view the divorce now approach with a degree of skepticism. Historical trends in 2026 suggest that rural judges are more likely to exercise their discretion to order additional counseling or prolong the cooling-off period if they believe a settlement is being rushed for the wrong reasons. This is where the divorce coach has emerged as a secret weapon in the Southern legal kit. A divorce coach is not a therapist and they are not a lawyer. In 2026, they are tactical strategists who help individuals navigate the social and psychological minefields of a Southern split. They provide the emotional stoicism required for the divorce now approach. Imagine a woman named Linda in a small town in Tennessee. Her husband is a beloved local figure, and the prospect of divorcing him is viewed by the community as a betrayal. A divorce coach works with Linda to develop a communications plan, essentially a script for how to handle social interactions at the grocery store, the school gate, and the church. The coach helps her remain focused on the tactical goals of the divorce, rather than getting bogged down in the community's judgment. By managing the emotional and social fallout, the coach allows the legal team to focus on the numbers. This specialized role has become so effective that many top-tier Southern law firms in 2026 now keep a divorce coach on retainer for their high-conflict cases. We also have to analyze the specific impact of the 2026 economy on these rural settlements. Many Southern families have wealth tied up in non-liquid assets like timberland, mineral rights, or agricultural quotas. These assets are difficult to value and even more difficult to divide without destroying their economic utility. The divorce now strategy in these cases often involves the creation of a family-limited partnership. This allows the couple to legally divorce while remaining business partners in the management of the land. This is a common potential outcome for those who want to move on personally, but cannot afford to liquidate a multi-generational asset in a volatile market. It is a pragmatic, if emotionally difficult, solution that is becoming a hallmark of the 2026 Southern divorce. As we look deeper into the mechanics of these rural cases, we see that the battle for the spirit of the law often comes down to the concept of the best interest of the child. In a progressive metro area, this might mean exposure to diverse viewpoints and extracurricular activities. In a rural Southern county in 2026, it often means stability, proximity to extended family, and adherence to established traditions. The divorce now approach must account for these different judicial interpretations. If you are moving now, you have to know which version of the best interest standard your judge is likely to apply. The American South is a region that prides itself on being distinct, and its approach to divorce in 2026 is no exception. It is a place where high-tech surveillance and ancient religious codes exist in the same courtroom. The divorce now strategy is the only way for many to navigate this duality without being consumed by it. It requires a level of planning and cultural awareness that goes far beyond the standard legal playbook. But there is one final hurdle that even the best coach and the most skilled mediator cannot always clear. It is the factor that has the power to override every contract and every agreement: the 2026 political climate. We are seeing a new wave of legislation in several Southern states that aims to restrict no-fault divorce altogether. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dive into the legislative war over the future of Southern marriage. We will look at the specific bills currently moving through state houses that could make the divorce now approach illegal within the next year. We will analyze the return of the alienation of affection lawsuit and the secret way that old world laws are being dusted off to punish those who seek a quick exit. You need to see how the political map of the South is being redrawn and why your window for a divorce now strategy might be closing forever. The legislative landscape of 2026 has become the primary antagonist for anyone pursuing a divorce now approach in the American South. For the last 50 years, the trend across the United States was toward liberalizing family law, making the exit from a marriage a matter of individual agency rather than state-sanctioned permission. But as we move through the mid-2020s, the pendulum is swinging back with aggressive momentum. In state houses from Austin to Baton Rouge, we are seeing a coordinated effort to dismantle no-fault divorce, a legal standard that has been the bedrock of the modern family court system since the late 1960s. The argument being made in 2026 by conservative lawmakers is that no-fault divorce has led to a destabilization of the Southern social fabric and a rise in childhood poverty. For the strategic litigant, this political shift means that the window for a streamlined, clean break is rapidly narrowing. Imagine a scenario in Texas involving a couple named Jason and Amanda. In early 2026, Jason decided to initiate a divorce now strategy after discovering a fundamental irreconcilability in their long-term life goals. Under the current Texas Family Code, Jason could file for divorce without proving any wrongdoing on Amanda's part. However, a new bill currently sitting in the Texas Senate, known as the Marital Covenant Protection Act, seeks to eliminate no-fault divorce for any couple with minor children. If this bill passes, Jason would be forced to prove specific grounds such as adultery, cruel treatment, or abandonment to obtain a decree. If he cannot prove fault, he might be legally barred from divorcing Amanda until their youngest child turns 18. This is not a hypothetical future, it is a legislative reality being debated in 2026. The potential outcomes for Jason would shift from a 6-month process to a decade-long legal stalemate. This movement is creating a race to the courthouse. Historical trends in 2026 show a massive spike in divorce filings in the weeks leading up to legislative sessions in states like Louisiana and Oklahoma. People are realizing that if they do not move now, they might lose the legal right to move at all. We are seeing case studies where legal teams are working around the clock to file petitions before a specific statutory deadline, knowing that a filing made on a Tuesday could be governed by no-fault rules, while a filing on a Wednesday could be subject to new, restrictive fault-based requirements. It is a high-stakes game of beat the clock that is turning the Southern legal system into a pressure cooker. But the legislative war is not just about the grounds for divorce. It is about the return of the heart bomb torts. In the 18th and 19th centuries, these laws allowed a spouse to sue a third party for interfering with their marriage. While most states abolished these long ago, North Carolina and Mississippi have famously kept them on the books. In 2026, we are seeing a resurgence of alienation of affection and criminal conversation lawsuits. These are not just dusty old statutes, they are being weaponized with 21st century technology. In North Carolina, a jilted spouse can sue their partner's new romantic interest for the loss of love and affection in the marriage. With the rise of high-fidelity digital evidence in 2026, location logs, encrypted messaging backups, and even smart home recordings, the burden of proof for these cases has plummeted. Consider a 2026 case study from Raleigh, North Carolina. A high-net-worth individual, let us call him Brandon, was sued for $2 million by his partner's ex-husband under an alienation of affection claim. Brandon's defense was that the marriage was already broken before he arrived, but the plaintiff used AI-driven sentiment analysis of the couple's text messages from 3 years prior to prove that a high level of affection existed until Brandon entered the picture. In the South, where juries still value the sanctity of the marital bond, these cases often result in massive 6-figure and 7-figure judgments. This is the dark side of the divorce now approach. If you move too quickly into a new relationship before the final decree is signed, you are not just risking your own assets. You are putting a target on anyone associated with you. Step by step, the 2026 political map is being redrawn to favor what lawmakers call sustainable marriage. This involves a 3-pronged legislative strategy. Step 1 is the mandatory expansion of the cooling-off period. Some southern states are proposing extending the waiting period from 60 days to 6 months, or even a full year, specifically to discourage the divorce now mentality. Step 2 is the reintroduction of mandatory reconciliation counseling. Unlike the mediation we discussed in previous parts, this is state-mandated therapy intended to save the marriage, regardless of the desires of the individuals. Step 3 is the financial penalty for the at-fault party. New proposals in 2026 suggest that if a spouse is found to be at fault for the breakdown of the marriage, they could be legally barred from receiving any portion of the other spouse's retirement or business assets. This legislative shift is creating a brand new phenomenon, the jurisdictional refugee. In 2026, we are seeing Southerners who have the financial means moving their primary residence to states like Nevada or Florida, which have historically more permissive divorce laws, specifically to establish residency before filing. They are fleeing the restrictive political climate of their home states to secure a more favorable legal outcome. But even this strategy is fraught with risk. Southern courts are becoming increasingly aggressive in challenging the residency of individuals who move just before a divorce filing, leading to complex jurisdictional battles that can last for years. The economic impact of this legislative war is profound. In states that are moving toward restricting divorce, we are seeing a chilling effect on the real estate market. If you cannot easily divorce, you are less likely to sell the family home, leading to a decrease in housing turnover and a stagnation of the suburban economy. Furthermore, the 2026 workforce in the South is becoming more immobile. Employees are turning down promotions or transfers to other states because they are trapped in a legal limbo where their marital status is tied to a specific piece of legislation in their current jurisdiction. The divorce now approach, which was once seen as a personal choice, has now become a point of major regional economic friction. As we analyze the potential outcomes of this legislative movement, it is clear that the American South is at a crossroads. One path leads toward a return to traditional, fault-based unions where the state has a significant say in the duration of a marriage. The other path leads toward a digital, high-speed exit strategy that prioritizes individual autonomy and asset protection. For the person watching this masterclass in 2026, the takeaway is clear. The rules you are operating under today may not exist 6 months from now. You have to be aware of the specific bills moving through your state house, and you have to understand that the legislative map is just as important as the legal code. But even if you successfully navigate the legislative war and the jurisdictional traps, there is one final arena where the divorce now strategy is either won or lost. It is the most private and most volatile part of the entire process, the emotional and psychological transition of the parents and the children. In the next part, we are going to look at the 2026 science of co-parenting in a divided South. We will explore how virtual reality is being used in court-ordered visitation, the rise of the professional co-parenting coordinator as a legal arbiter, and the secret way that your own children's digital footprint can be used to override a custody agreement. We are going to reveal the specific psychological blueprint used by high achievers to survive the transition without losing their minds or their legacy. The fight is no longer just in the courtroom, it is in the very mind of the family. To execute the high achiever's psychological blueprint, one must first master the art of the parenting coordinator, a role that has become the de facto ruler of post-divorce life in the South as of 2026. As the divorce now approach accelerates the legal timeline, the court often lacks the bandwidth to manage the granular, day-to-day friction of a newly separated family. This is where the parenting coordinator or PC steps in. In states like North Carolina and Florida, a PC is a professional, often a duly licensed attorney and psychologist, who is granted quasi-judicial authority. This means they have the power to make binding decisions on everything from soccer practice schedules to the specific location of a holiday handoff, without the parties ever stepping back into a courtroom. Imagine a case study involving a couple in Charleston, South Carolina. Let us call them Jackson and Olivia. Jackson is a high-ranking surgical consultant, and Olivia is a partner at a prominent architectural firm. When they opted for a rapid exit in early 2026, their high-conflict personalities made it impossible to agree on their 7-year-old daughter's extracurricular involvement. Instead of filing a motion for every disagreement, which would cost $10,000 in legal fees and months of waiting, their final decree mandated a PC. When Olivia wanted to enroll their daughter in a competitive travel tennis league that intersected with Jackson's weekends, the PC conducted a mini-hearing at a coffee shop. The PC reviewed the school calendar, the tennis schedule, and the travel requirements, then issued a written directive that both parents were legally required to follow. This is the divorce now efficiency in action. It replaces the slow grind of the judiciary with the rapid-fire decision-making of a private arbiter. However, the psychological blueprint of 2026 also accounts for a new high-tech reality, virtual reality visitation. As the Sunbelt's economy drives professionals to relocate across the South for high-paying roles in aerospace or biotech, the traditional every other weekend custody model is collapsing under the weight of geographical distance. In 2026, Southern courts are increasingly writing VR-assisted visitation into permanent parenting plans. This is far beyond a standard video call. Imagine a father in Huntsville, Alabama, putting on a VR headset to meet his children, who are living in Northern Virginia, in a synchronized digital environment. They aren't just talking. They are playing a virtual game of catch, or building a digital fortress together in a 3D space. Historical trends show that while this technology preserves a sense of presence, it also introduces a new layer of psychological complexity. The potential outcomes of VR visitation are still being studied, But in 2026, it is being used as a tactical tool to maintain the best interest of the child standard while allowing parents to pursue career mobility. The high achiever uses this as a compromise to avoid a bruising relocation battle, which is one of the most difficult and expensive types of litigation in the South. By offering a robust, high-tech visitation schedule, the moving parent can often secure a divorce now settlement that would otherwise be blocked by a judge concerned about the severance of the parental bond. But even the most advanced VR cannot hide the child's digital footprint, which in 2026 has become the ultimate weapon for overriding a custody agreement. We are seeing a surge in cases where a parent's legal strategy is dismantled by the very devices they bought for their children. Consider a scenario where a parent in Charlotte claims they are strictly adhering to a court-ordered 8 p.m. bedtime and a no-screens policy. In a 2026 custody modification hearing, the other parent's legal team subpoenas the logs from the child's gaming console and their smartwatch. The data shows that the child was active on a global multiplayer server at 11:30 p.m., and their heart rate data from the watch indicates they were in a state of high physiological arousal consistent with competitive gaming. Step by step, the 2026 digital audit for children is a cold reality. Step 1 is the hardware subpoena, targeting any device with an internet connection. Step 2 is the metadata analysis, looking for timestamps and geolocation pings that contradict the parent's testimony. Step 3 is the social media scrape. Even if a child is too young for a platform, their friends often tag them in photos or videos that reveal the truth about a parent's household environment. In the South, where a parent's reputation for providing a disciplined, traditional upbringing is a major factor in custody, these digital leaks are catastrophic. The divorce now approach requires you to realize that your children are not just your family. In the eyes of the court, they are walking data centers. This leads to the centerpiece of the high achiever's blueprint: parallel parenting. For decades, the goal of the family court was co-parenting, a collaborative, communicative relationship between ex-spouses. In 2026, the South has recognized that for high-conflict, high-achieving individuals, co-parenting is often a recipe for perpetual litigation. Parallel parenting is the strategic alternative. It is the practice of parenting with absolutely zero direct communication. All logistics are handled through a court-monitored app, and each parent has total autonomy during their time. There are no shared birthday parties, no joint parent-teacher conferences, and no flexible schedule changes. The psychological benefit of this approach is the total decoupling of the ego from the legal battle. By treating the ex-spouse like a difficult business associate, rather than a former lover, the high achiever can sustain a divorce now trajectory without the emotional burnout that leads to tactical errors. Case studies from 2026 indicate that parallel parenting reduces the rate of return to court filings by nearly 40% in the first 2 years post-divorce. It creates two distinct, high-functioning silos where the children can thrive without being caught in the crossfire of a never-ending negotiation. Yet, as we look at this blueprint, we have to address the most dangerous part of the 2026 transition: the aftershocks. A divorce now strategy is designed for speed, but the psychological reality of the South often leads to a delayed reaction. We see individuals who navigate the legal and financial war with ice-cold precision, only to experience a total collapse once the final decree is signed. This is often triggered by the social isolation that comes with a rapid exit from a tightly knit Southern community. The high achiever's blueprint must include a post-divorce reintegration plan that accounts for the loss of the marital social identity. In the South, you are often defined by who you are married to and which family you belong to. When you execute a divorce now strategy, you are effectively deleting that identity overnight. The potential outcomes of failing to plan for this are a rapid decline in professional performance and a loss of the very legacy you fought to protect. This is why the most successful 2026 transitions involve a secret, pre-planned relocation or a total rebranding of one's public persona before the ink on the decree is even dry. We have deconstructed the legal traps, the financial mines, the high-tech surveillance, and the psychological blueprint. We have seen how the American South has become the most complex laboratory for family law in the world. But there is one final piece of the puzzle. It is the document that puts the exclamation point on the entire process, the final decree. In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to look at the 2026 version of the clean break. We will reveal the one clause that can protect your future earnings from ever being touched by an ex-spouse, the secret to a drama-free final handoff, and the reality of life in the South after the divorce now strategy is complete. But be warned, the final step is the most difficult, because it requires you to face the one person you haven't been able to audit, yourself. The conclusion of the modern Southern divorce is not what you think it is. You need to see the final reveal of the exit architecture before you make your first move. The internal audit is the final, most grueling stage of the exit architecture, because it is the only part of the divorce now approach that cannot be handled by a forensic accountant or a high-priced litigator. In 2026, we have seen a rise in what sociologists call the victory vacuum. This is a state where an individual has successfully navigated the high-tech surveillance of the South, secured their business assets through a Tennessee Investment Services trust, and utilized a non-disparagement agreement to silence social media fallout, yet they find themselves emotionally bankrupt. The reason is simple. They spent 12 months treating their life like a corporate restructuring and 0 months preparing for the silence that follows the final decree. The self-audit requires you to ask if you are running toward a new life, or merely running away from an old identity. In the American South, where family and history provide the core of one's social standing, the sudden absence of that framework can lead to a psychological freefall that no amount of protected equity can break. To prevent this, the exit architecture of 2026 includes a specific focus on the final decree, the legal instrument that marks the formal end of the transition. In the Southern legal tradition, the final decree is often viewed as a simple court order, but for those using the divorce now strategy, it must be a comprehensive merger and incorporation document. We are analyzing historical trends where decrees in 2026 are increasingly including a waiver of interest in post-separation labors. This is a technical but vital clause. Imagine a case study involving Jonathan, a petroleum engineer in Houston, Texas. Jonathan is on the verge of a major career pivot in 2027 that will likely triple his income through stock options in a new carbon capture venture. If Jonathan's 2026 final decree is not drafted with extreme precision, his ex-spouse could potentially return to court 3 years later, arguing that the groundwork for that success was laid during the marriage. The waiver of post-separation labors acts as a digital firewall, ensuring that every dollar earned after the date of separation is legally and permanently separate property. Step by step, the 2026 final decree requires 3 specific layers of protection. Step 1 is the indemnification and hold harmless clause. In the modern South, debt is often as complex as assets. You must ensure that you are not just splitting the credit card balances, but that you are legally protected if your ex-spouse defaults on a loan that was technically in both names, but assigned to them in the divorce. We have seen potential outcomes where individuals had their credit destroyed years after a divorce because their ex-spouse failed to refinance a vehicle or a home as ordered. A robust 2026 decree includes a self-executing power of attorney, allowing the compliant spouse to sign documents on behalf of the non-compliant spouse to force a sale or a title transfer. Step 2 is the sunsetting provision for alimony. In 2026, the era of permanent alimony in the South is effectively over, but the terms of the transition are where the battle is won. A strategic decree will include specific terminating events beyond just remarriage or death. It may include the cohabitation clauses we discussed earlier, or a specific income threshold for the recipient. If the ex-spouse starts a successful business or receives a significant inheritance, the alimony should, in a well-drafted 2026 decree, automatically trigger a downward modification or a total cessation. This prevents the high earner from becoming a lifelong insurer for an ex-spouse who is no longer in financial need. Step 3 is the neutral site protocol for the final handoff of assets and documents. The divorce now approach aims for a clean break, but the logistics of moving 20 years of life can lead to a resurgence of conflict. In 2026, we are seeing the use of third-party digital vaults for the exchange of all vital documents, tax returns, children's medical records, and property deeds. This eliminates the need for face-to-face interaction and ensures that every exchange is time-stamped and verified. It turns the finality of the divorce into an administrative task rather than an emotional confrontation. But what does life look like once the final decree is signed and the exit architecture is complete? In the American South of 2026, we are witnessing the rise of the rational actor. This is an individual who has moved past the traditional Southern archetypes of the victim or the villain. They have embraced the divorce now mentality as a form of radical pragmatism. They understand that in a high-growth, high-tech economy, the traditional model of marital endurance at all costs is often a path to financial and psychological obsolescence. Case studies from cities like Charlotte and Austin show that individuals who execute a clean break are 50% more likely to successfully re-enter the professional and social markets within 18 months than those who engage in multi-year, fault-based litigation. Imagine the final scenario. A Sunday afternoon in a quiet suburb of Birmingham. The children are being picked up for their week with the other parent. There is no shouting, no tension, and no interaction. The parents use a smart lock system to allow the children to transition between homes, and all communication is handled via an encrypted parenting app. The financial accounts are fully decoupled, the non-disparagement agreements are in place, and the final decree is filed away in a secure digital cloud. This is the ultimate goal of the divorce now approach. It is not about a lack of love or a disregard for the family unit. It is about the recognition that in 2026, the most loving thing you can do for a family that can no longer stay together is to provide them with a structured, efficient, and permanent exit. The historical trends are clear. The South is not becoming less traditional, it is becoming more strategic. The divorce now approach is the response to a world where data, speed, and asset protection are the new pillars of stability. We have spent this masterclass deconstructing the mechanics of this shift, from the digital surveillance of the smart home to the legislative wars in the state houses. We have analyzed the potential outcomes of every tactical move, from the silver bullet to the nesting divorce. What remains is for the individual to decide if they have the discipline to follow the blueprint. As we conclude this deep dive, we have to recognize that the divorce now approach is just the beginning of a larger transformation in the American South. The way we view property, parenting, and personal legacy is being rewritten in real time. But as one door closes, another opens. While this series has focused on the architecture of the exit, the next great shift in Southern culture is already appearing on the horizon. It involves a fundamental change in how the next generation, the children of the 50-50 default and the VR visitation, will view the very concept of commitment. We are already seeing the first data points of a trend that will make the divorce now approach look like a relic of a simpler time. In our next series, we will explore the rise of the liquid marriage and the secret way that 2027 legislation is preparing to phase out the traditional marriage license altogether. You have mastered the art of the exit. Now it is time to look at the future of the entrance. The evolution of the American South never stops, and neither does the data.